Kia ora and welcome back to the HRPI. I'm Marie Tovio, Employment Relations Consultant, Private Investigator, and your guide to navigating New Zealand's trickier workplace situations. Today's case file is the evidence equation, how employers assess information and make decisions that are fair, reasonable and defensible. This episode is relevant to New Zealand workplaces and HR practice, and it's a critical one, because even when employers follow a process, things can still come undone at the decision-making stage, and that usually comes down to how evidence has been assessed. Under the Employment Relations Act 2000, the test is not whether your decision was perfect. The test is whether it was something a fair and reasonable employer could have decided based on the information available at the time. That means your outcome must be grounded in a logical and balanced assessment of the evidence. So, what does that actually involve? Let's break it down into three key elements: reliability, credibility, and context. First, reliability. You need to consider how dependable the information is. For example, is it first-hand or second-hand? Is it consistent with other information? Is there any supporting evidence, such as emails or messages? Second, credibility. Does the account make sense? Is it detailed and consistent, or vague and changing over time? Are there any reasons the person might not be impartial? And third, context. This is often where things are missed, because a piece of information on its own really tells the full story. You need to consider what was happening at the time, the relationship between the people involved, and any relevant background. Now, let's look at a practical example. Two employees provide different accounts of an incident. One says there was aggressive behaviour. The other says it was a misunderstanding. There are no independent witnesses. So, how do you make a decision? A common mistake is to treat both accounts as equal and say, well, we can't determine what happened. But a fair and reasonable employer is expected to analyse the evidence, not avoid the decision. That means looking at which account is more detailed, which is more consistent, whether either is supported by other information, and how each aligns with the broader context. You may reach a conclusion that one version is more likely than the other, even without absolute certainty. And that's acceptable. Employment decisions aren't about proving something beyond reasonable doubt. They're about determining, on the balance of probabilities, what most likely occurred, and then responding reasonably in the circumstances. Another common issue is what I call selective evidence use. This is where an employer focuses on information that supports their initial view and overlooks information that doesn't. That creates risk. A fair process requires you to consider all relevant information, even when it challenges your assumptions. Let's take another example. An employee is accused of inappropriate communication. There's a message that appears to support that, but the employee provides additional messages showing the broader conversation and context. If the employer focuses only on the first message and ignores the rest, the decision may not be reasonable. So, what should a structured approach look like? First, gather all relevant information. Second, assess reliability and credibility carefully. Third, consider the full context. Fourth, weigh the evidence. Don't just list it. And finally, if you're making an important employment decision, document your reasoning. If you're ever asked why you reached a particular conclusion, your notes should be able to tell that story. There are also some common pitfalls to watch for. One is expecting certainty and delaying decisions because of that. Another is treating all evidence as equal without any analysis. And another is failing to explain the reasoning behind the outcome. So, the key takeaways from today's case file are: Decisions must be based on a balanced assessment of the evidence. Reliability, credibility and context all matter. You don't need certainty, but you do need reasonableness, and your reasoning must be clear and documented. If you're dealing with conflicting accounts or complex situations, this is often where the most value can be added. I regularly support employers with investigations and decision making, helping them assess evidence properly and reach outcomes that stand up if tested. The information in this podcast is provided as a general overview of key employment topics and does not replace tailored advice. Every situation is different and the appropriate steps can vary depending on the specific circumstances. If you're unsure about how to proceed in your workplace, I encourage you to seek advice and support. Feel free to get in touch with me directly. The evidence reviewed, the details weighed, and the difference between assumption and reason made clear. Mā te wā.